Please welcome Shalini. Shalini has been a faculty with us and is an organizational development consultant and works and has recently set up Uncube, which is
Yes.
basically her new venture, which is going to look at the future of work. I'm very, very excited to hear more about it and also hope that we collaborate as we go ahead. So she's going to talk to us about collaborate as in the way Harappa uses the habit, and also what collaborate is really going to mean to the future of work. What are we going to do as we go ahead, and why this is a very, very important skill and so highly rated in the coming years. We are going to but first, before we begin, let me give you a little bit more background on Shalini. She's written a book called The Secret Life of Organization. As I said, she's recently started or co-founded Uncube, which is a think tank which will look at the future of work. Shalini is a graduate of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. She holds a PhD from UCLA and is a global fellow at the Wharton School. She's previously worked with the Deutsche Bank, Escorts, and many other organizations. So let's begin with me giving you a little bit of explanation of what collaborate really means in the Harappa universe. Collaborate for us is, really talking about, how do you sort of work with other people, where you have to look at things like how do you build trust, how do you sort of manage teams, not as leaders, but as an individual who has to operate and work within a team. Same way, if you're establishing trust, how do you establish trust with your teammates, with not necessarily with your boss, with someone who's reporting to you? So it's both ways. We're also going to talk about how do you navigate the modern workplace. These are some of our courses. How do you sort of understand what is happening in the current workplace? How do you work with different kind of people with different work styles, etc. We also have a course called Negotiating Wisely, where we basically are telling you very, very clearly that negotiation is not a one-off thing. You and I are negotiating on everything, every time, every day. And the way to go ahead with negotiations is not always to just look at what you want, but also make sure that the person opposite you gets what they want. That's the ideal way of negotiating. And we finally also have a course called Expanding Networks, so critical in times like these. It's not so much about relationships and friendships and other things. It's really about how do you deal with people who are relevant to your career, and how do you give something to them and take something back from them. This is largely how the Harappa collaborate habit is framed. But let's have a look at this LinkedIn poll that a LinkedIn study that we found. If you look at the top 10 skills that are going to be required in the coming years, 0.4, 5, 6, 9, all of them have something or the other to do with collaboration, people management, coordinating with other, emotional intelligence, negotiation. Why is this happening, Shalini? Why are we suddenly discovering that that collaboration is going to be a very, very important skill going ahead?
A really good question. And to be honest, when you first spoke to me about this webinar, I was pretty excited because there's such a direct link between collaboration as a habit and the future of work skills. And the real reason is that what we're seeing around us is becoming so much more complex, and it's changing much faster than any one individual, no matter how smart, can either understand completely on their own or even design a good response for. So we're seeing this across industries, across fields. I mean, just take a look at what's happening to us now, right? With so many businesses disrupted so suddenly. Shocks like this are way beyond the capacity of any one individual working on their own to either understand or respond to. So because the world we live in has, to say a cliche, become more and more VUCA, or definitely so much more uncertain and turbulent, organizations are needing teams more and more. And that's why so many of these people collaboration skills are right at the top of the skills which are going to be needed, in the future of work. So that's why I was really excited, because the world is changing. Okay. When the world was simpler, if you like. You could divide work very neatly. And,
Okay.
say 20, 30 years ago, job descriptions were really the rage, where you could, just list out what the person had to do and set very neat KRAs, which would stay for a year. All of that's changed. None of that works anymore because the world around us is changing. Hence teams, hence the ability to work well in teams, hence collaborate. So that's the huge shift we're seeing. It's so interesting. See, many of us, certainly me, when we were growing up, we had this image of, people like Einstein, Newton, who were these visionaries who managed to create breakthroughs in science which fundamentally changed paradigms, and which they did, by the way. But if you look at scientific discoveries over the last decade or so, you'll find that there are very few which are truly solo. In fact, this has created a huge controversy in the world of science because so many people say that now the Nobel Prize for science is outdated because the Nobel needs to go to the team which is working. And the rules of the Nobel finally are that, you can't give the prize to more than 3 people for the, same piece of work. And I was shocked when I heard, but many of the major discoveries which have won the Nobel Prize have actually got co-authored papers with more than 5,000 people behind it. So that's
Wow.
the size of teams which is creating breakthroughs of today. And that follows the fact that, the more complex a discipline becomes. We were speaking about complexity of the world, but this is equally true of complexity of disciplines. The science of today is not the science which Einstein encountered, for instance. So the more complex a body of knowledge becomes, the more you need a team for any real discoveries to happen. And that's really what it is about. So we are seeing more and more, it is scientific teams of hundreds and thousands of people who are creating discoveries which in the end win the Nobel Prize, creating a huge turn because many people feel it's completely unfair. So that's just an example of how far we've come from, just the solo star who could think of it at the top of their head to now a team very systematically working at a problem.
Why do you think trust is one of the most sort of important elements of this, Shalini?
I must say that the audience is really smart because that is the case. All of us would have participated in team exercises or been part of some work team where, we felt that there just wasn't enough trust in the team for anything good to come out of it. So, it's one of those ironies that you think your teamwork is about the work, but actually it's first about trust. And we assume that when we're going to jump into the work automatically, trust will happen. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Study after study, including this massive study by Google itself, when Google studied its own teams to, uncover what is it that makes teams much more successful, says it's trust, it's psychological safety, it's a sense of belonging or not, which determines whether the team's actually going to come up with something amazing or not. So you have a very smart audience.
I'm going to ask you something which, is a question that many of the young people and generally people believe that trust is something instinctive. Either I trust you or I don't. How can trust play such an important part? If I don't trust you, what do I do? Can I really find a way to start trusting you? Isn't that like a long shot? Shouldn't we rely more on this person has more experience, or this person can give, it has such a big persona, or whatever it is, why trust?
Yeah,
and can we really build it?
It's a really good question. And, in that sense, I love your framework of the trust equation, because that really speaks to what we can do in our individual capacity. Now, what can we do so that people are more inclined to trust us? That's what this looks at.
I can quickly explain the trust equation. We've been using it in our Establishing Trust course. And it's, of course, Shalini will talk more about it. It's essentially credibility plus reliability, which is and plus openness. Openness, essentially the ability to listen to other people, the ability to be vulnerable with other people, to be able to share what's important to you, and low self orientation, essentially to be able to put your interests behind the interests of the team, which doesn't mean that you're sort of letting people walk over you, but more like you keep the interest of the team or the goal or the mission a little higher than just letting everything be about you. That's how we sort of explain this. Shalini, you want to tell us a
I
little
love
bit
this
more
equation.
about?
I love this
Okay.
equation because it's one of the most succinct ways to begin to create trust around yourself. So let's say we are starting with ourselves, right? When we enter a team, how do we create trust around ourselves? Some parts of this actually are maybe easier to understand than others. Certain credibility, do you know what you're talking about, seems very obvious, right? Like you mentioned, just before we spoke about the trust equation, shouldn't we trust someone who knows something? So absolutely, credibility speaks to exactly that. Does the person know what they are talking about or doing? Reliability, can they be depended on? When they say they will do something, can we trust that they will do
Correct.
whatever it is that they said they would
Yeah.
do? The two which are interesting because they aren't necessarily about the task, but about the interpersonal connection, is
Okay.
what you call openness and what I call intimacy, or what the equation, the original, speaks about as intimacy, which is, do I understand you as a person? And intimacy works in very interesting ways. So, some people might argue that the reason why, a very popular explanation is that the reason why the American president George Bush got elected at the time he did was because people felt they could have a beer with him, which feels like what a silly reason, right? But in a sense, no, because he was relatable. And
Okay.
intimacy is about, do I understand you? Do I get you? Do I get you? And it adds that special interpersonal chemistry piece, which we all know is there, but we don't necessarily, we aren't maybe comfortable even acknowledging it or speaking of it many times. So we focus on the credibility, knowing our stuff. We focus on being dependable. But this equation acknowledges that there is this intimacy. So in a sense, it makes the argument for being more authentic, if you like, at least letting people see who you are and not
Okay.
being as guarded about who you are, so that you can build a human to human connect. The other part,
Before you go to self
yeah.
orientation, I'm getting lots of questions. Some of them are asking us, can you explain the difference between credibility and reliability more clearly?
Oh, okay, sure. So credibility is, should we believe you? Do you know anything? So for instance, if I did a master class in physics, I would have zero credibility, right? You would like, I have I have nothing to do with the discipline. So I would very obviously have zero credibility. That's not the only thing. I can think of a million master classes where I would have pretty low credibility. I may still be very reliable and turn up at exactly the time which I was supposed to turn up and do my homework and do everything else that I said I would do. So credibility is, do I know whatever expertise I'm supposed to know? Reliability is, can you depend on me? So like when Seema asked me to come for a meeting, will I actually show up or will I not show up? Will I
Okay.
have done whatever was supposed to be or expected? That's what reliability is. So both are very important, by the way. It's not that they should be underestimated. They're both extremely important. And when you're starting out your career, building credibility, reliability are actually, I would say, very easy. Easy sounds wrong, but very logical first steps. You have to
Okay.
know what you're talking about, and you have to be able to deliver whatever people expect you to deliver.
Very interesting idea around the self orientation piece, where you talk about the paradox of giving. You explained this to me. Can we have a look at that?
So uh, there's this book by Adam Grant. It's called Give and Take, and it's a must read, I would say. Uh, it's a must read because it turns on its head so many ideas we have about whether we should, particularly in the professional world, how much should we give and how much should we hold back. So he speaks about people having three different kinds of orientations, if you like. First, what we're more familiar with, the takers, where I'm in it for myself, I'm there to win the game. And in every interaction I go into, I'm going to make sure that it benefits me majorly. Your interest might be incidental, but my own interest is what is at my, front and center of my mind. Now, we've all met many takers, and obviously in the self-orientation equation, their self-orientation is low, which is why it helps us understand why, their self-orientation is very high, which is why our trust sometimes for them is low, because we can instinctively feel that even when we're working with them, our own interest is not terribly important. So, so we know that we come across a lot of takers. And then there are givers, people who are interested in what's good for you or what's good for the team in a team situation, what's really in the interest of the team. And their own interest, it's not that that doesn't necessarily matter. It may or it may not, but that's not really at the forefront. It's about, can the team deliver? And he looks at this paradox because when we enter the professional world, I think many of us learn the first decade or so that, we have to be completely aggressive. This is whatever else we knew before we entered the workplace is no longer relevant. This is a dog-eat-dog world. We have to snatch somebody's lunch. So there are all these terrible, shall I say, cliches in our mind about how we should behave with our potential collaborators or the teams that we are part of. So he does a study and he looks at how does our tendency or orientation to give or take influence success.
Okay.
And what he finds is very interesting. So
all the takers are on the top.
I mean, takers do well, as do matchers, though. Matchers do really well. So matchers is tit for tat, essentially. You do me good, I do you good. You scratch my back, I suppose. But in many, many professions, the people who are absolutely at the top are actually givers, which is the paradox. That is not what you would expect. So he looks at that and he tries to speak about the many, 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 many different reasons why that works. And one huge reason is because people trust them. People trust them and they want to work with them. And over a period of time, they have a reputation of being great people to work with, both as people whom you'd want to call into your team and eventually as people who could lead your team, your organization, or or more, for instance.
So this is an interesting sort of model where we talk about how, based on whether we want to appear assertive or whether we want to appear cooperative, we'll sort of either compete, collaborate, compromise, avoid, or accommodate. So how do you sort of, in today's or in the future of work, or as we are sort of looking to collaborate or become better collaborators, how can we look at using this model, and how do we sort of apply this in our interactions with others?
See, I love this model, and I love it for two reasons. One is it directly connects with the give and take philosophy. So your collaborators who are right, at that end, are focused on the interests of the other or the larger group they're working for, but they're also quite focused on their own interests. It's not that they've given that up. It's just that that's not the only thing that they are concerned about. They are concerned about what's good for you, which is why you trust them and want to work with them. They are concerned about what's good for the organization. They're also concerned about what's good for them. So collaboration in that sense is where a number of givers who are right at the top would probably show up. Whereas givers who their own interests, are somehow not central. Now, it could be for many, many reasons, and we can only speculate, avoiding accommodation. That seems to be the preferred style. So I love this framework because it so clearly tells us that we can be focused on what's good for another entity, our team, our organization, without necessarily missing out on what's good for us. But the other reason why I like it is because it doesn't mean we are always collaborating.
Okay.
Because there are situations and situations and situations. And actually, if you read this framework in its entirety, it speaks to how at different points in time, in different situations, you can choose, a different strategy. So for instance, let's say I have a neighbor who complains about, taking a silly example, the leaves being stacked under a particular tree. Okay, so such a silly example. Should I really be collaborating on that the leaves should be under this tree or that tree? I would say no, just avoid the conflict. It's no point.
Okay.
Right? So when you understand what's the range of responses which are possible, you can play to whichever matches the situation and not necessarily get stuck in one, even though one might be dominant. Or if you are maybe taking your child out for an ice cream and you didn't want to go, of course, now that all sounds like fantasy, but you could be completely accommodating and that would be fine too. So they're all fine in different spaces, and just understanding the range available to you is very helpful. And the reason why this is so helpful when you're developing the collaborate habit is because collaboration, as it plays out, is a pretty messy affair.
True.
It's so easy to do something on our own, right? I think of it, I do it, job done, no conflict, no stress, etc. Right? That's why many of us love solo work. On the other hand, when we're working in a team or a group, it's never like that. I mean, it's never like that even with people whom we trust. I might think A, person, the other person will think B, and someone else will think C, or right? That's what makes a team good, because these multiple perspectives will eventually produce a good outcome. But when you're in it, it's not that it always feels like that, right? It feels stressful. It can feel stressful, at least, depending on how the conversation goes. So understanding this range of responses, even within your team setting, allows you to make choices of, okay, is this a big enough competition of ideas which you have to get to the heart and find a solution that works for everyone? Or is it fine to say, listen, it's okay, you can do this. It's
At
fine.
this point, I wanted to bring in this very interesting thing that we had discussed, which was about solo performers or stars, or that one person everybody looks at. And how you explained to me that, sometimes we forget that while that one person may be the key in many things, it's because of all the people around that person that person is able. Can we look at that particular study, and maybe Shalini will explain?
Yeah. That's a great point. And there's this wonderful study which has been done by Professor Boris Kreuzberg. He's written a book also around it, which speaks about, like cardiac surgeons are supposed to be rock stars as medical doctors, right? So the study looks at, as they get more experience, do they really get better? And they look at mortality rates of their patients, etc. So there's a lot of technicality in how they've measured this. So what the study finds, quite interestingly, is that yes, as a cardiac surgeon does more and more surgeries, their fatality rate goes down, but it only goes down in a particular hospital. So what's actually happening is not that his or her own individual personal skills are accounting for the difference, or at least most of the difference. What's happening is that he or she is developing a great team in that hospital, and that team is getting experienced as a team. So those are actually teammates which are transferring to what you would ascribe to the cardiac surgeon, right? You will ascribe the fatality rate to the cardiac surgeon, not to the nurse, not to the other medical staff which is with him. But what's actually happening is that the team is getting better. And so he speaks about this paradox that a lot of performance that we ascribe to an individual, of course, the cardiac surgeon is doing the surgery. Of course, he has skills, no doubt about that. But it's not just him. Along with his being or her being a superstar, she has now a team which understands her and is able to work well with her. So that's really the interaction which is taking place. And Seema, that speaks to your point about, is it the individual superstar? Is it the team? And going ahead, as the world we're working in is so much more complex, of course, we have to bring in our own individual personal skills. But that's only part of it. A large part of it is how well are we going to work with our teams and how strong are our teams going to become.
Okay, let's move on quickly to our last thing, which is again, what happens when somebody is taken out and from like a very high performing team or joins a new team. This is a very interesting model that we also teach in our managing teamwork course, which is called the Bruce Tuckman model, which says that every new team or every person who joins a new team will find that they go through these 4 stages. Something called forming, when the team comes together, whether it's a completely new individuals coming together or that one person being inducted into the team. There will be some sort of storming, some sort of arguments, fights, not sure this is working, what is happening. From there, it normally moves to a point where the team itself decides certain rules, or that person figures out what are the rules in the team and sticks with it. And that's when it moves to a high performing team. Shalini, will this still hold true as we go ahead? Is this something that will change, or do you think this makes sense? And this is something that if we are aware of, we will find it easier to settle into teams and figure out how to sort of make the environment work for us.
Absolutely. Actually, understanding this helps you more skilled when we enter a team. And I mean, if we think of it, it's absolutely, at one level, it's common sense, right? That you have, in your case, you've got 4 boxes, so a bunch of 4 individuals who have been assigned to a particular team and have come together. All 4 are going to come at it from 4 different places, hopefully. And they will bring a different perspective. They'll bring a different set of ideas, not just on the task, but on how conflicts should be resolved or how decisions should be made. So you are, without necessarily being aware of it, you are discussing this at 2 levels. You're discussing the task itself, whatever the task you've been assigned to, say create a great course, but you're also resolving conflicts on what do we do when we don't agree, so you are operating at both those levels. And because you're going to have, when a team is formed, 4, 5, 6 people coming at it from different places, there is a time when you don't know what your decision rules are going to be. And it is, the storming stage is a stage in those decision rules becoming clear. And it isn't as much about, someone putting them on a piece of paper. It's they implicitly get decided. Sometimes they get decided in positive ways, which is when, the group truly comes to a conclusion that everybody is satisfied with and works for everyone. Sometimes it can also be dysfunctional, where it lands up being, okay, this is the view, X is what we're going to do, everybody else just get on with it, right? Either way, you've set the norm, whether you're aware of it or not. You've set the norm, and you've sent very important messages for, in our particular team, this is the way we discuss topics, this is the way decisions are made, etc. Now, once those norms are set and your team sort of is ready for actual performance. Of course, if the norms were decided in a manner that's healthy, where different people had an opportunity to discuss, debate, and come to a resolution that everybody felt at peace with, then you're going to have a high-performing team. If these norms are arrived at because, somehow some decision was forced through, or, or hierarchy, or, whatever, in a dysfunctional way, where a lot of people felt silenced and felt that, they didn't have a voice in that particular team, you once again set the norm. And the norm is going to be one person's view works, everybody else listen, do your bit, and move on. So either way, you would have set a norm, and you would have performed, your team would have performed either well or not so well. So that's really at the heart of it. Actually, the heart of collaborating is something we know as children, but we just forget.
Let's quickly look at that interesting study you had for us and do a quick poll, and then lots of questions in the box. Let's get down to answering them. This is called the Marshmallow Challenge, and they're basically supposing there are 3 groups. All groups have the same equipment or the same stuff, which is 1 marshmallow, 20 uncooked spaghetti sticks, a yard of tape, and a yard of string. And this is their goal, to build the tallest structure. So let's look at the poll and let's see if you can find out which of these three groups, in MBA students, design students, or kids, who actually could have built this. Can we have a look at the poll, please? And have 30 seconds only for this. Which of the 3 groups, or did all of them do it? Thank you so much. It's interesting, Shalini. Nobody seems to think that business school students can do anything. We shouldn't be doing MBAs anymore, should we?
Many people would argue that, by the way. You're not the only one. Yeah, and I mean, I may have let the cat out of the bag a little bit as well, but you're absolutely right. It's kindergarten kids who did the best in it, and for 2 reasons. One, business school students. So there's something about the world of business, even business school, that primes us that now this is going to be about, it's going to be about strategy, it's going to be about analysis, it's going to be about, a very rational conversation, and it's going to be less about really connecting on the task and just getting on with it. So this was done several times over many years, this study, and the tallest tower which was built by kindergarten children was, I think, some 26 inches or something like that, whereas business school students couldn't manage more than 10 inches or something like that. So there's a huge difference. Because when they observed children trying to build this tower, it wasn't about, okay, so I'm in this activity, now I have to show Seema how amazing I am and how smart I am, and therefore I'm going to say such smart things. No, they were just getting on with the job. They were focused on the job. But when it's business school students, and perhaps even in many or some organizations, you're focused on, do I sound smart? Where am I? Will so-and-so think well of me? So there are just so many other considerations around status and who is more important, who is less important, am I making an impact, etc., that take your mind space instead of actually getting on with the task. So business school students didn't do well at all. Interestingly, the design students apparently did even worse than the business
Oh my
school
God.
students. I'm not exactly sure
So
why that's the
liberal
case.
arts also didn't work in this, did it?
So it's, at its core, we do best. And I mean, honestly, if you just think about it, you will know this is true. We do our best when we're in a team where we feel safe, we feel we belong, and we feel we want to contribute to whatever that team goal is. The moment that's our focus, our performance is through the roof. But when teams are formed, not many people necessarily understand that the first step is this. It's psychological safety. It's a sense of belongingness within the team. And once you've got those foundational elements, then work will happen. People will want to work. You'll find norms that are functional and, not go into a dysfunctional space.
Okay. I just want to also ask you another interesting question. Can a selfless giver in a workplace harm the team by being too agreeable?
Well, it's a very good question because it depends on where that agreeableness is coming from. If it's coming from genuinely, it's fine. But if it's coming from, I'm withholding information I have or an idea or perspective I have so that we can move on quickly, which, by the way, I think I may have done also sometimes, it doesn't help because in being agreeable, you have taken conflict which would have been helpful for the team out of the place. So here's the thing, conflict feels stressful, which is why many people hesitate with collaboration. It is stressful, let's agree. I would love everyone to always agree with me, but if they did, then what's the point in having a team, right? So the action of conflict, it's a stressful action, but without that, you aren't going to get a good outcome. Now, the conflict doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be aggressive, but it has to be, differences of ideas coming together to come to the best decision. So yeah, by withholding information, ideas, you can harm the team.
How to collaborate with a team where there is a very huge age difference and difference in education?
What a good question. I'm not sure that the fundamentals are very different, except that it will mean that depending on whether you are the minority or the majority, either way, actually, reaching out to understand another's perspective takes a little more effort. So, see, this is, to be honest, it's a challenge people have always had, and I think are going to increasingly have, because we're going to need teams for so much more. And on the one hand, it's so much easier to understand people who are like us, right? Who speak the same language, etc., etc. And it's easy to trust them because we instantly get where they're coming from, right? That intimacy score is very quick to, get high points on. But the more different the ideas are, the better the potential outcome. But it's going to be much more effortful process, less easy. So should you do what is easy? Should you do what's in the best interest of the outcome? Now that's a call you'll have to take.
Can we just look at the recommendations that Shalini is making for the books, please? Yeah, these are the books that Shalini is recommending. There's, of course, The Trusted Advisor, Charles Green. That's Shalini's own book. There's Give and Take with Adam and Culture Code. Thank you so much for joining us, Shalini. Thank you so much for taking so much time and answering so many questions. There are many more questions here. We'll try and collate them and see if we can send them off to you. This is our fourth Habit Series webinar. We have one last one, which is tomorrow on leadership. And this is leading yourself, dealing with you as a person and what can you do. Same time, we'll be looking at, and thank you. I hope you had a good time, Shalini.
I loved it. Thank you for having me over. Thank you.